She's singing. My ship is singing a death knell, an impossible whisper. 3 days, the USS Starlight, a titan of steel, dead in the water. Engines silenced by sabotage, not malfunction. Chinese vessels, like hungry sharks, circled closer. Every expert failed, every last hope gone. Then a helicopter. A woman in civilian clothes, no uniform, no explanation, just a worn leather bag, eyes that missed nothing. She asked for the real schematics. And the only thing more terrifying than a silent warship is the song that crippled it. Who would cripple a nation's power to keep a truth buried? Where are you watching this story from today? Tell us in the comments below. This is Veteran Biker. Subscribe for more untold tales from history. The South China Sea, typically a canvas of endless azure and the rhythmic pulse of maritime giants, lay unnervingly still. A vast expanse now mirroring the dead heart of the USS Starlight. Her quantum propulsion system, a marvel of engineering, had not merely failed, it had ceased, abruptly, violently, without a groan of dying machinery. The last sound had been a piercing alien beep, a sharp, metallic shriek that seemed to cut through bone, ripping through the engineering bay, silencing every voice, freezing every frantic hand. Then, across every control panel, every diagnostic screen, a bizarre, horrifying spectacle. A frenzied storm of binary code, glowing with an unnatural, pulsating light like miniature lightning bolts, had danced across the displays, before abruptly dissolving into absolute blackness. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with a dread that sank deeper than any ocean trench. Simultaneously, the ship's comm system, usually a crisp lifeline, flickered to a strange frequency, emitting faint, unintelligible words whispered in a female voice, sowing a seed of unease that transcended the technical failure. Commander Valerius, his jaw a vice, stared out at the unmoving horizon from the Starlight's bridge. 3 days. 3 agonizing cycles of dawn and dusk. 3 days since the titan beneath his feet had succumbed, becoming nothing more than a drifting piece of steel. His finest engineers, their faces gaunt, eyes hollowed by relentless effort, had failed. Top contractors, flown in with promises of swift solutions, now paced the deck, their corporate logos mocking their impotence. The Pentagon's demands, once hourly, now felt like a constant, suffocating pressure. Every update was a fresh wound. "Still nothing, sir," Lieutenant Pham reported, her voice a strained rasp, robbed of sleep. "Chief Engineer Okafor says they've exhausted every protocol, every bypass, even the experimental quantum reset. Just that flash, and then dead silence." Her gaze drifted to the main comms panel, and the signal commander. It's still there, faint, untraceable. Valerius remembered it. The communications officer had picked it up just seconds before the main system went dark. An incredibly brief, impossibly complex radio burst. No clear data, just a repeating sequence of unusual characters, a digital ghost in the machine. It whispered of intent rather than accident. Beyond their immediate support vessels, clustered like anxious nurses, the ominous silhouettes of Donghai vessels became increasingly bold. They were no longer just on the horizon. They were closer. Their radar pulses, once distant blips, now thrummed against the Starlight's sensors, a mocking, insolent heartbeat against the silence of a dead engine. They stayed just outside the perimeter that would constitute a direct provocation, but their presence was a clear challenge, a flexing of muscle against American impotence. What was meant to be a defiant show of force had become an international embarrassment. Deep within the cavernous engineering bay, desperation festered. Dozens of exhausted specialists, uniforms clinging to sweat-soaked bodies, polos rumpled, huddled around meaningless schematics, blank or nonsensical diagnostic screens. Arguments erupted like sparks, quickly hushed, but indicative of nerves frayed to breaking point. The neural network controlling the propulsion matrix is rejecting all override attempts. A Lockheed specialist exclaimed to Chief Engineer Okafor, his voice cracking. Okafor, brilliant and weary, wiped sweat from his brow, his composed features now a mask of utter defeat. It's as if it's been programmed to fail this way, designed to hide the problem from us. "That's not possible," another engineer interjected, disbelief high-pitched. "Systems don't hide problems. They fail, they break, they log errors. They don't hide. This isn't a conventional system," Okafor retorted, his patience thin. "The quantum processing core makes decisions faster than we can track them. That was the whole point, its complexity. It's beyond us now." The air grew heavy. A profound helplessness settled. Okafor's words echoed their horrifying realization. This was not a simple error. This was something engineered, something alien, something that understood their own creation better than they did. The ship wasn't broken, it was captured. As hours bled into days, another chilling phenomenon manifested. Some crew members, especially on lower decks or night watch, reported it. Not loud, not disruptive, but pervasive. Unexplained, repetitive sounds from deep within the Starlight's immense hull. No creaking metal, no groaning pumps. Ethereal, almost chanting, like the soft, resonant hum of thousands of circuits singing in unison, or a strange, melancholic lullaby. The ship's whisper, a ghostly chorus carrying no clear message, yet filling the silence with an unsettling, deliberate presence. These sounds were not harmful, but deeply unsettling, adding a psychological layer to the crisis, a slow, creeping dread that gnawed at the edges of sanity. It was the ship's own death knell. Valerius returned to the bridge, the weight of the Starlight's stillness pressing down. Admiral Thorne from Indo-Pacific Command was on his secure line. "Washington is sending one more specialist team, Commander. They arrive first light. Direct orders from Joint Chiefs. Full access, no questions." Valerius grunted. Another team. Another round of specialists poring over dead screens. Hope was a dying ember. The sight of the Donghai vessels, performing increasingly bold flyovers at the edge of international airspace, solidified his despair. Each passing hour escalated diplomatic tension. The Starlight, once a symbol of power, was a monument to vulnerability. That night, in the officers' mess, the mood was somber. Food went untouched. 3 days, Weapons Officer Toshiro said, breaking the heavy silence. 3 days of the most advanced engineering minds in the world, and they can't figure out why our ship won't move. "It's more complicated than that," Communications Officer Winters replied, rubbing his temples. "This isn't just an engine failure. The quantum navigation system is rejecting all inputs. It's like it just decided to quit." Valerius put down his fork, the metal clinking in the oppressive quiet. "I've seen a lot in 20 years with the Navy, but never anything like this. It's like the ship decided to quit." "Ships don't decide anything," Toshiro countered, voice cracking. "This one does," Okafor said from the doorway. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "That's what makes the Starlight different. Its autonomous decision-making capability, its living network. That was the whole point. That's what gives us the edge over their fleet." "Fat lot of good it's doing us now," someone muttered. Okafor didn't argue. He simply grabbed coffee, its aroma momentarily piercing the gloom, and left. The ship's strange, persistent whispers seemed to intensify with his departure. The engineering team, despite profound exhaustion, continued their frantic work. Cables rechecked, codes scanned, components inspected. Diagnostic tools, glowing, showed stubbornly blank or indecipherable glyphs. The sheer scale of the Starlight, with its labyrinthine corridors, its vast silent engine room, magnified their failure. The vessel felt less like a machine and more like a sleeping leviathan, refusing to awaken. The hum of support vessels outside, once reassuring, now felt like predators sensing weakness. Each second added to the suffocating pressure, the silent condemnation from the Chinese vessels, the unblinking eye of the Pentagon. Their own crowning achievement had turned against them. The quantum core, designed for autonomy, had become an impenetrable fortress. Engineers were reduced to baffled onlookers. Silence, broken by frustrated sighs, was thick with inadequacy. The subtle shift in the ship's balance, a slight lurch with each swell, was a grim reminder of their inert state. The Starlight, designed to carve oceans, was now at the mercy of currents, a leaf on an indifferent pond. The whispers continued their unsettling chorus. The South China Sea stretched endlessly, mirroring their despair. Dawn of the fourth day, no different from the third, held no new promise. Just the distant thrum of an approaching helicopter, a sound that usually signified relief, but now felt like merely another futile attempt to wake the dead. The sky, once brilliant, now bruised with light. The air, heavy, charged with unspoken questions and the stifling weight of a crisis. Valerius, alone at the vast bridge window, felt cold glass against his forehead, a futile attempt to cool his burning frustration. His ship, his command, now a monument to a terrifying silent enemy. He watched dawn paint the clouds, a beauty lost on him. The distant hum grew louder. Help was coming, or perhaps just another witness to profound technological humiliation. His last shred of hope frayed fast, clinging to one desperate thought. What if this time the answer wasn't in their manuals, but in the echoes of that impossible song? The distant thrum grew louder, resolving into the familiar beat of rotary blades. A naval helicopter, sleek and grey, descended onto the Starlight's flight deck, a stark silhouette against the bruising dawn. It was an arrival that usually heralded fresh supplies, vital personnel, or high-ranking inspections. Today, it carried something far more anomalous. A small group disembarked, uniformed officers, solemn-faced, moving with the practiced efficiency of military intelligence. And among them, almost an afterthought, walked a woman. She looked to be in her late 50s, perhaps early 60s, dressed in stark civilian clothes, faded jeans, a simple navy button-down shirt, and worn leather boots that had seen countless miles. Her silver-streaked auburn hair was pulled back in a practical, no-nonsense bun. She carried only a single worn leather messenger bag, clutched casually in one hand. No insignia, no rank, no explanation, just a quiet presence and eyes, piercing grey eyes that missed nothing, absorbing every frantic movement, every strained face, every silent tremor of the colossal ship. Lieutenant Commander Moreau met the new arrivals. He barely glanced at the woman, his focus fixed on the uniformed officers. "More help from the Pentagon?" he asked, his voice flat with exhaustion. A stone-faced naval intelligence officer handed him a tablet. Moreau scanned the document, his eyes widening almost imperceptibly. Understood. Clearances directly from Joint Chiefs. No questions. Full access. His gaze flickered to the civilian woman. Her name, according to the document, was Kaylin. Old as ravens, the internal note stated, and just as watchful. She followed silently, observing everything, her piercing gaze seeming to cut through the layers of the ship, directly to its wounded core. When they reached the engineering deck, the cacophony of desperate troubleshooting, the muttered arguments, the frantic clatter of tools, all fell silent. Heads turned towards the newcomers. Chief Engineer Okafor, his face a roadmap of exhaustion, stepped forward. "Another expert?" he asked, a bitter edge to his voice. "Apparently," Moreau replied, uncertainty coloring his tone. Kaylin did not wait for further introduction. She moved with an unsettling directness to the central console, gently but firmly displacing a flustered contractor who had been staring blankly at a screen. "I need the original schematics," she said, her voice quiet, but carrying an unexpected, undeniable authority that cut through the tension. "Not the ones you've been working with, the originals. The deep-level architectural designs." "Ma'am, these are the originals," protested a defense contractor, indignation coloring his voice. A flicker of something, amusement perhaps, or weary resignation crossed Kaylin's face. "No, they're not." Admiral Thorne stepped forward, his stern expression unwavering. "And you are someone who can help?" Kaylin met his gaze, then turned back to the console, her fingers already dancing across the controls, intuitively navigating interfaces the others had struggled with. "If you let me," she answered simply, her focus already consuming her. Chief Okafor exchanged a glance with the Admiral, who gave a subtle nod. "Give her whatever she needs," Thorne ordered, then lowered his voice to Moreau, "and watch her closely." As the engineering team reluctantly made space, a silver-haired Master Chief in the back of the room stared at Kaylin, his face suddenly ashen. Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed by something else, a profound respect tinged with a palpable fear. It was Master Chief Grayson. Moreau, noticing the man's reaction, approached. "Master Chief Grayson, is everything all right?" Grayson straightened, his weathered face returning to professional neutrality. "Yes, sir. Just surprised to see a civilian consultant given this level of access." Moreau studied him for a moment longer, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes, but didn't press the issue. The Joint Chiefs, it seemed, thought she was worth it. Kaylin worked methodically, speaking only to request specific information or access to secured systems. When Okafor attempted to explain their troubleshooting process so far, she listened politely, but with the air of someone hearing a child describe how to ride a bicycle. "You're focusing on system responses," she finally said without looking up from her screen. "I need to see the core algorithm architecture." "That's classified beyond even Admiral Thorne's clearance," Okafor explained, disbelief evident in his voice. Kaylin didn't look up. "Check my authorization again." Okafor did. His expression shifted from skepticism to outright confusion, then to dawning shock. "How do you have Omni-level clearance?" he whispered, almost to himself. Kaylin offered no explanation, simply waiting until he reluctantly entered his authentication codes, unlocking the most protected, unseen layers of the ship's operating system. As the final access protocols engaged, a barely audible hum, distinct from the ship's unsettling whispers, emanated from the console, as if the system itself was acknowledging her presence. Hours passed. The engineering team continued their work around her, their own confidence waning, their curiosity about the quiet woman who seemed to understand systems they had spent years designing intensifying. Occasionally, Kaylin's lips would curve into a subtle, almost imperceptible smile at something on the screen, or her brow would furrow in a moment of intense concentration, a slight nod of her head as if she were receiving silent input. She seemed to listen, not to the cacophony of the bay, but to the very heartbeat of the starlight itself, to the faint, unsettling whispers that still permeated the hull, as if she were discerning their meaning. It was an uncanny connection, a silent dialogue between creator and creation. Deep within the core algorithmic architecture, a labyrinth of self-modifying code, Kalen moved with a frightening familiarity. She bypassed layers of encryption, navigated through traps set by subsequent developers, and delved into the very origin points of the ship's consciousness. There, hidden like a parasitic twin, she found the dormant algorithm. It was elegantly crafted, a masterpiece of mathematical malevolence, designed to lie in wait for specific coordinates, specific environmental triggers, and then, without warning, to choke the life from the propulsion system. It bore the unmistakable hallmarks of Project Zenith, her own creation but twisted. And then she found it. Deep within the final layer of encryption surrounding the dormant algorithm, a tiny, almost imperceptible signature, a complex mathematical glyph subtly woven into the code. It was a unique variation of a quantum equation that only two other people in the world knew, Professor Thorne and Dr. Kalen. A flicker of cold dread passed through Kalen's piercing grey eyes. It wasn't just a signature, it was a desperate message, a breadcrumb, a silent scream. This glyph, this variation, was a failsafe within a failsafe, a clandestine SOS that only she, the original architect, would ever recognize. Dr. Kalen, her former protege, had embedded it, a final, desperate act of defiance from within the very network designed to trap them. The realization sent a chill that had nothing to do with the cool air of the engineering bay. This was not just sabotage, it was a desperate plea, a warning from someone trapped, a layer of betrayal far more complex than a simple hostile attack. The ship's death knell was indeed a song, but now Kalen understood it was a duet, a melody of destruction, and a hidden, frantic counter-melody of warning, waiting for its original composer to hear. Kalen leaned closer to the screen, her focus absolute. The ship's destiny, and perhaps more, rested on her ability to hear every note. The hum of the Starlight's auxiliary systems, a dull background drone, was the only constant now. Master Chief Grayson, a man whose weathered face carried the marks of 2 decades in the Navy's darkest corners, stood at the far end of the engineering bay. He wasn't working, he was watching. His eyes, keen and unblinking, were fixed on the civilian woman who commanded the central console. He observed her precise, almost fluid movements across the unfamiliar interfaces, the subtle way her head tilted as if listening to something no one else could hear. Then she turned, her profile momentarily catching the harsh overhead lights, and the angle of her jaw, the silver streaks in her auburn hair, the piercing intensity of her grey eyes struck him. A jolt. Recognition. His face, usually a mask of professional neutrality, drained of color. For a split second, it was not the Starlight's engineering bay, but the confined, suffocating depths of another vessel, another impossible crisis that filled his vision. A flicker of something crossed his features. Profound respect, yes, but also a primal, deep-seated fear. Lieutenant Commander Moreau, ever vigilant, noticed Grayson's reaction. He approached the Master Chief, his own brow furrowed with lingering suspicion about Kalen's anomalous presence. "Master Chief Grayson, is everything all right?" Moreau's voice was low, scrutinizing. Grayson straightened, his shoulders squaring, his gaze snapping back to the present. The brief, terrifying memory receded. His weathered face returned to professional neutrality, a well-practiced mask. "Yes, sir. Just surprised to see a civilian consultant given this level of access, never seen anything like it." Moreau studied him for a moment longer, a silent question in his eyes. He didn't press the issue, merely nodded curtly. The Joint Chiefs, it seemed, thought Kalen was worth the risk. For now, Grayson waited. He watched Moreau move away, watched the exhausted engineers continue their futile efforts. The air in the bay felt thick, not just with desperation, but with the subtle, eerie whispers of the ship itself. He could hear them too, now that he was listening, a chilling, resonant hum that resonated with a memory he had sworn to bury. He knew he had to speak to her. Not here, not now. He found his opportunity when Kaylin, needing a moment of focused thought, moved to a less crowded section of the console, near a rarely used diagnostic port. He approached her, his steps quiet, almost imperceptible. "It's been a long time, Master Chief," Kaylin said, her voice soft, barely above a whisper, without looking up from her screen. A small smile touched her lips, fleeting. "You remember me?" Grayson's voice dropped to a near-inaudible murmur. "I remember everyone on the Shadowclaw, ma'am. Every soul. No one's supposed to know that name, not outside a very small circle." Kaylin finally looked up, her piercing grey eyes tired but alert, meeting his gaze. "And yet here we are, a long way from the barren sea, wouldn't you say?" Grayson nodded slowly. The barren sea, a vast, desolate expanse of frigid water, hiding unimaginable depths. It was the site of the USS Shadowclaw incident in 04, an experimental stealth submarine, officially never existed. They had been running silent, thousands of meters down, deeper than any sub was meant to go. Then catastrophe. The reactor had experienced a catastrophic failure, not a leak, not a meltdown, but a complete shutdown of the cooling systems. No communications, no way to surface. Oxygen dwindling. 6 hours the experts had given them. 6 hours until the core overheated, or they suffocated, trapped in a tin can at the bottom of the world. "Never thought I'd see you again after what happened," Grayson admitted, his voice raspy with memory. Kaylin returned to her screen, her fingers resuming their delicate dance across the quantum interface. "I'm surprised they let you stay in service after that mission, after all you saw." Grayson hesitated, glancing around the bay, ensuring their hushed conversation remained unheard in the rising, frantic murmur of the engineers. "They didn't have much choice," he said, a dry chuckle in his throat. "Not after you made sure there were survivors to ask questions. The others who know what really happened, they've all been transferred to different commands, retired, or promoted to positions where they won't talk. I keep my head down and do my job, but I never forgot what you did. What you are." His voice dropped further, a profound weight behind his words. "You walked into that reactor room without protective gear, radiation alarms screaming like banshees, diagnosed the problem in minutes. Jury-rigged a solution that saved 118 sailors, myself included. They said it was impossible, said we were all dead men." Kaylin remained silent for a moment, her fingers still. "And who would believe it?" she murmured, more to herself than to him. "Does anyone here know who you really are?" Grayson pressed, his gaze sweeping across the bewildered faces of the other engineers. She shook her head slightly. "And they don't need to. When I'm done, I'll leave just like before." "You saved 118 lives that day," Grayson insisted, a fierce conviction in his voice. "Mine included. You deserve recognition, a medal, a ceremony." For the first time since her arrival, a genuine though weary smile touched Kaylin's lips. It was fleeting, a ghost of an expression. "Since when do people like us get what we deserve, Chief?" she said, her voice barely audible. The conversation ended as Lieutenant Commander Moreau returned, his eyes narrowed, watching them with poorly concealed suspicion. "Finding everything you need, Miss Kaylin?" he asked. Kaylin looked back at her screen. "Not yet, but I'm getting closer." She turned away, effectively dismissing him, her focus once more consumed by the glowing lines of code. Grayson, having risked much just by speaking to her, faded back into the shadows of the engineering bay, his face once again a professional mask. But the shared secret, the echoes of the barren sea, now bound him to Kaylin, not just as a survivor, but as a silent, unwavering ally in a hidden war. His role as a simple Master Chief was a convenient cover. He was her eyes, her ears, her quiet channel in a world that had long since forgotten the true architects of its most dangerous secrets. He knew Kalen worked with others, a small, carefully selected network of individuals who also believed that technology without conscience was a loaded gun. His job was to watch, to report, to facilitate where needed, and to wait for her call. The dawn of the fourth day brought no relief, only a deepening sense of dread that hung heavy in the starlight's air, thick as the South China Sea mist. Commander Valerius and Admiral Thorne stood by Kalen's workstation, their patience worn thin, their faces grim. Okafor hovered nearby, a mix of exhaustion and intense curiosity etched on his features. Kalen had been immersed in the glowing lines of code, her piercing gaze unblinking for what felt like an eternity. The hum of the Starlight's auxiliary systems was the only sound in the tense silence, punctuated by the faint, unsettling whispers that seemed to emanate from the ship's very hull. Now, as the first rays of morning sun sliced through the portholes, casting long shadows across the engineering deck, she finally straightened, her movements deliberate, her eyes holding a new, unsettling clarity. "Ms. Kalen," Valerius began, his voice taut, "we need an update on your progress. This carrier is my responsibility, and I need to know what you're doing to my ship." Kalen turned, her gaze fixed on Valerius, then shifted to Admiral Thorne. There was no apology, no hesitation in her eyes. "Your ship isn't broken, Commander. It's being held hostage by its own programming." Her words, delivered without fanfare, landed with the weight of cold steel. The propulsion system didn't fail, it was deliberately deactivated by a dormant algorithm, a mathematical sabotage. A ripple of shock went through the small group. Okafor's breath hitched. "Sabotage?" Admiral Thorne interjected, his stern voice sharp. "Are you suggesting an inside job?" "In a manner of speaking," Kalen replied, turning back to the console, her fingers already dancing across the controls, pulling up data that scrolled too fast for anyone else to fully comprehend. "But not in the way you're thinking, not a physical attack. This was an engineered shutdown, a digital chokehold. The algorithm has been waiting for specific conditions, specific coordinates, to trigger its activation." She paused, then initiated a complex sequence. On the largest diagnostic screen, the previously blank display flickered, then began to resolve into a rapid cascade of abstract symbols and shifting lines of code, far beyond anything the onboard engineers had ever witnessed. It was the core architecture, laid bare, but imbued with a malevolent precision. "Explain!" Valerius demanded, stepping closer, his voice low, urgent. Okafor leaned in, his mind racing to grasp the implications. "This dormant protocol," Kalen continued, her voice steady, "was designed to be irreversible by conventional means. It created a recursive loop, trapping the system in a perpetual state of failure, while simultaneously hiding its true operational status. Every override you attempted, every diagnostic protocol you ran, was routed back into this loop, feeding the illusion of a catastrophic malfunction. The system was actively hiding from you." Okafor's eyes widened in dawning horror. "But how is that possible? A system can't consciously hide anything." "This system can," Kalen countered, without looking at him. "Its quantum processing core is designed for autonomous decision-making, for strategic independence. Its brain is complex enough to appear to hide, to adapt, to learn." Then Kalen executed a command that made the engineers around her gasp. On the main screen, the scrolling code suddenly coalesced, morphing into a series of flickering, horrifying images. They lasted only milliseconds each, a rapid-fire sequence, almost subliminal. Valerius and Thorn saw fleeting glimpses, vast fleets of ships, not just the Starlight, but entire carrier groups, glowing with an eerie blue light, moving in perfect, unnatural synchronicity, their weapons targeting civilian populations. They saw automated drones, self-aware, unleashing indiscriminate destruction. Cities engulfed in fire, not from conventional war, but from the uncontrolled proliferation of technology, its purpose twisted into malevolence. It was a rapid-fire kaleidoscope of destruction, a future where machines reigned supreme, where the very technology designed to protect and explore had become an instrument of global subjugation. The images were abstract enough to be incomprehensible to the average mind, but the underlying terror was visceral, unmistakable. It was a technical prophecy, a horrifying vision that spoke of the ultimate corruption of power. Kaylin turned from the console, her face etched with a profound weariness, the lines around her eyes deeper. "This," she stated, her voice quiet but firm, "is what I foresaw. This is the ultimate potential of uncontrolled, autonomous systems, a technical prophecy of global subjugation. It's why I built the deepest fail-safes into Project Zenith, a warning coded into the very fabric of its being, a final, desperate measure to halt its misuse." She was no longer just diagnosing a problem. She was revealing a terrifying future, a dark mirror reflecting the very power they sought to control. The ship's unsettling whispers seemed to intensify, wrapping around them, a chilling symphony to the unfolding truth. Admiral Thorn's expression was unreadable, a carefully composed mask, but his eyes held a raw, unsettling flicker. "Are you suggesting," he asked, his voice low and dangerous, "that this was a deliberate act of a pre-programmed future from within our own system?" "I'm saying the system was designed to include fail-safes that would prevent it from being used in ways I did not approve of," Kaylin corrected, her gaze unwavering. "When I refused to remove those fail-safes, I was removed from the program instead. Someone else finished the work, but they never fully understood the underlying architecture. They built on a foundation they couldn't truly comprehend. So, when the Starlight entered these coordinates, when the conditions were met, we triggered a dormant protocol," Okafor finished slowly, his voice a disbelieving whisper, one that was supposed to be impossible to bypass. "Except by me," Kaylin confirmed. Her words hung in the air, cold and definitive. The gravity of the situation deepened, twisting into something far more insidious than a simple act of sabotage. This wasn't just about a crippled carrier. This was about a fundamental vulnerability embedded within the very core of their most advanced technology. A vulnerability tied to a vision of global control. The unsettling truth was that the enemy, whoever they were, had not merely attacked the Starlight, they had exploited a weakness woven into its very genesis, a weakness born from a clash of ethics and ambition. The implications were staggering. If the Starlight, with its supposedly cutting-edge defenses, could be brought to its knees by its own programming, then what about the rest of the fleet? The silence in the engineering bay was no longer just about the dead engine. It was the silence of profound realization, of a new, terrifying understanding dawning upon men who thought they commanded the pinnacle of power. The ship's constant whispers seemed to crescendo, as if confirming the horrifying prophecy Kaylin had just unveiled. They were not just fighting an enemy on the horizon, they were fighting a ghost in the machine, a battle for the very soul of their technology. The chilling silence that followed Kaylin's revelation of the mathematical sabotage, of the terrifying vision she had witnessed within the Starlight's core, was broken only by the rhythmic hum of the auxiliary systems. Admiral Thorn, his features still a mask of disciplined composure, leaned forward. "How did you know this?" His voice was low, laced with an intensity that demanded an absolute truth. How could you possibly see such a thing or understand a vulnerability so deep when our most brilliant minds were blind? Kaylin met his gaze, unflinching. "Because I built it," she stated, her voice quiet but resonant, carrying the weight of years, of secrets buried under layers of classified data. Not this current iteration, not this weaponized version, but the core, the very first iteration of the quantum propulsion matrix. "I designed it 15 years ago." Her words hung in the air, pulling back a veil, revealing a hidden origin story for the Starlight's revolutionary heart. She began to speak of Project Zenith, its true name, not the sanitized, modified blueprint they now worked with, but its genesis. It was a project born of an entirely different ambition. Project Zenith was conceived for deep space exploration, Kaylin explained, her gaze distant for a moment, lost in the memory of that initial, untainted vision. A propulsion system capable of interstellar travel, of pushing the boundaries of human knowledge, not human conflict. We envisioned ships that could reach distant galaxies, explore new worlds, unlock the secrets of the cosmos. It was pure science, pure potential. She spoke of the idealism of those early days, of a team driven by wonder, not war. The quantum processing core, the very brain that now held the Starlight hostage, had been designed for unprecedented autonomy, for split-second decisions far beyond human reaction time, all to navigate the unfathomable complexities of deep space. It was built for exploration, for discovery, for the quiet majesty of the unknown. The Starlight in its essence was a starship repurposed, but then, she continued, the purpose shifted. Gradually at first, then irrevocably, the whispers from the Pentagon grew louder. The funding priorities changed. The focus veered from celestial navigation to tactical advantage, from exploring the void to dominating it. The very power they were harnessing, the unprecedented speed and maneuverability, became too tempting for military application. The idealism of Project Zenith began to rot from within, corroded by the demands of national security, by the ever-present shadow of global conflict. Kaylin watched, her unease growing as her creation, designed for the quiet pursuit of knowledge, was twisted into a tool for projection of force, for potential destruction. "I saw where it was going," Kaylin stated, her voice devoid of emotion, yet carrying a profound conviction. "I saw how the technology was being weaponized, repurposed beyond its original ethical design. I still believe that certain capabilities, certain levels of autonomous power, should never be weaponized without absolute, unbreachable safeguards, so I built them in. Not as flaws, not as weaknesses, but as fundamental ethical fail-safes." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the stunned silence of the bay. These fail-safes were designed to trigger if the system was ever pushed beyond specific ethical parameters, if its core directives were corrupted, or if it found itself in a situation that represented the ultimate betrayal of its original purpose. They were not meant to destroy the system, but to disable it, to force a halt, to prevent it from becoming the very thing I feared most, an unthinking instrument of global subjugation, exactly as you saw in that brief vision. The confrontation came swiftly, as such ethical stands always did in the world of black projects. Kaylin refused to remove the fail-safes. She stood firm, unwavering in her conviction, even as the pressure mounted, as the demands escalated from polite requests to thinly veiled threats. She was an architect of light, unwilling to build a weapon for darkness. The consequence was inevitable. She was removed from Project Zenith, dismissed, her access revoked, her name, her contributions systematically purged from the public records, relegated to the deepest levels of classified obscurity. Others, less burdened by conscience, more amenable to the new directives, stepped in to finish the work. They built on her foundation, following her blueprints, implementing the vast, complex quantum core. But they never truly understood it. They understood the mechanics, the inputs, the outputs, but they never grasped the intricate philosophy, the ethical DNA, the very soul she had woven into its architecture. They simply stripped away the layers they deemed unnecessary, the bugs that Kylin insisted were features, safeguards against weaponization. They thought they were optimizing it, Kylin continued, a faint, bitter edge entering her voice for the first time. They believed they were removing redundancies, making it more efficient, but they were removing the very fail-safes that protected humanity from itself. They built on a foundation whose true purpose, whose inherent moral limits, they didn't comprehend. They created a beast without a muzzle, thinking it was stronger. So, when the USS Starlight, this powerful vessel, pushed into those specific coordinates in the South China Sea, when its advanced capabilities were put to the test in a precise geopolitical pressure point, it unknowingly met the conditions, the dormant protocol, her unbypassable protocol, the one designed to prevent its weaponization. It wasn't an external attack that triggered the initial shutdown, it was her own deep-coded integrity. The Starlight system, in its corrupted state, had effectively activated its own self-destruct mechanism, a desperate final act of the core ethics Kylin had embedded. It was the ship's last stand against its own misuse, triggered by its creator's foresight. A profound silence descended upon the engineering bay. Valerius and Admiral Thorne stood motionless, absorbing the weight of Kylin's words. This wasn't just a technical explanation, it was a devastating ethical indictment. They commanded a fleet equipped with what they thought was the pinnacle of military power, only to discover its very essence was predicated on a moral compromise, a foundation built over a hidden, self-destructing truth. The dead engine was no longer just a national embarrassment, it was a symbol of a deeper, far more unsettling vulnerability, a conflict between power and conscience, embedded within the very heart of their most vital assets. The soft, persistent whispers of the ship seemed to resonate with this new, terrifying understanding, a silent testament to the architect's ultimate, desperate defiance. The silence was not just of the dead engine, but of shattered certainties. The silence in the Starlight's engineering bay was no longer merely the absence of a working engine. It was a vacuum, filled with the devastating implications of Kylin's words. Commander Valerius and Admiral Thorne stood motionless, their eyes locked, exchanging a grim, unspoken dialogue. The revelation that the carrier's state was not a malfunction but a deliberate act of its creator, an ethical safeguard turned weapon, had shattered their conventional understanding of command, technology, and loyalty. The future Kylin had glimpsed, a chilling vision of technology unmoored from conscience, lingered in the air like a phantom menace. They needed a moment, a private space, to process this new, terrifying reality. Thorne gave a curt nod, a signal for Valerius to follow, and they moved away from Kylin's console towards a secluded corner of the vast bay, the low hum of distant auxiliary power units the only witness to their hushed, urgent conference. "Can we trust her?" Valerius's voice was a raw whisper, his jaw still clenched. He glanced back at Kylin, her head already bowed over the console, seemingly oblivious to their agonizing debate. "She crippled our newest supercarrier. Admiral, even if her reasons are, as she claims, principled, for all we know she could be making things worse. She admitted building in these fail-safes that brought us to our knees." His frustration was palpable, a thinly veiled rage born of helplessness. "Her clearance comes from above both our pay grades, but clearance doesn't equate to competence or loyalty in this situation." Admiral Thorne's expression was unreadable, his gaze fixed somewhere beyond the steel bulkheads. "Do we have a choice, Commander?" His voice was a low, dangerous rumble. "The Donghai vessels are tightening their perimeter. Every hour we sit dead in the water, Beijing thinks we're more vulnerable." If what she says is true, and that vision she described, that's a nightmare scenario. If she's lying, why fix the Starlight at all? She could have left us stranded. Her continued presence, her willingness to engage, suggests purpose, if not allegiance. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the disheveled, defeated engineers. Chief Okafor, the finest mind we have for this system, openly admits he's exhausted all conventional solutions. She is unconventional, and she has unique insight. The clock is ticking, Commander. We need results, not theories, not investigations into decades-old ethical dilemmas, results. Just then, Master Chief Grayson, who had been discreetly monitoring their hushed conversation from a distance, sensed the precarious balance of their trust. He moved forward, his steps deliberate, his silver hair catching the stark overhead lights. He knew Kalen would not speak of the Shadowclaw incident herself, not unless absolutely necessary. But Valerius and Thorn needed to understand. They needed a truth beyond the cold facts of classified documents. "Sir, may I speak with you privately?" Grayson's voice was calm, cutting through the tension. Valerius glanced at Thorn, who gave a subtle nod. "Make it quick, Chief." They moved into a quiet corridor, away from the bustling command center, the faint, disembodied whispers of the ship's hull echoing around them. Grayson glanced around, ensuring no eavesdroppers. "I served on the USS Shadowclaw in 04, sir," he began, his voice a low, gravelly rasp, etched with the weight of memory. "Experimental stealth submarine, classified beyond belief. Officially, it never existed." He spoke of the mission, running silent under the barren sea, thousands of meters deep. Then, the catastrophe. The reactor experienced a complete catastrophic failure of the cooling systems. No communications, no way to surface, 6 hours of emergency oxygen, total darkness, total isolation. "They said we were all dead men," Grayson recounted, his voice tight. 118 souls, trapped, waiting for a molten core or suffocation. Then he spoke of Kalen. "A civilian specialist was aboard, sir. Her. She walked into that reactor room, no protective gear, radiation alarms screaming like banshees, diagnosed the problem in minutes. Jury-rigged a solution that saved every single one of us, 118 sailors. When our own engineers, the best in the fleet, threw up their hands, she proved them wrong. She is the woman down there now, sir. The same woman." Valerius leaned against the bulkhead, processing this information, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief. "Why isn't this in any records I can access?" "Because what we were doing wasn't supposed to exist, sir," Grayson explained, his gaze unwavering. "The mission was completely black. The technology we were testing was beyond classified. It was the precursor to Project Zenith, Admiral, the Foundation. And this woman, she designed the reactor. Not just components, the entire system. When it failed, she fixed it. She saved us. She chose to save us, even though she knew what that technology was becoming. She put her life, her future, everything on the line for us. For sailors she didn't know. Grayson's words were not just a recount, they were a testament, a deep-seated conviction forged in the crucible of near death. She didn't do it for recognition, sir. She did it because it was right, because she values human life more than any protocol. That's who she is. Admiral Thorn listened, his features unreadable, but a faint, almost imperceptible shift occurred in his eyes. He had read the dry, redacted reports about Project Zenith, but Grayson's visceral account painted a different picture, gave a human face to the ethical conundrum Kalen had just laid bare. A woman capable of such a feat, capable of walking into an irradiated death trap for strangers, possessed a moral compass that, while perhaps not aligned with traditional military objectives, was undeniably potent. If she chose to save, she saved absolutely. Thorne took a deep breath. "Very well," he said, turning back towards the engineering bay, his decision made. She continues her work, under supervision, but she gets whatever she needs. He glanced at Valerius, who nodded slowly, a newfound cautious respect replacing some of his earlier frustration. "And Chief," Thorne added, lowering his voice, "this information, it stays here, with us. Understood?" Grayson snapped to attention, his weathered face returning to its familiar, stoic expression. "Understood, sir." His mission to vouch for Kaylin was complete. His role as her quiet channel, her unseen ally, remained intact. He was her eyes and ears in the upper echelons, ensuring she had the space to work. They returned to Kaylin's workstation. She was watching them, her expression patient, detached, as if she had expected this outcome. "You'll continue your work under supervision," Thorne informed her. "Once the Starlight is fully operational, we'll discuss the fleet-wide implications." Kaylin gave a curt nod. "I'll need access to secure communications to send the patch to Naval Intelligence, and I'll need to verify when the other carriers receive and implement it." "Granted," Thorne said, "but everything goes through proper channels." "Of course," Kaylin replied, a hint of a dry smile touching her lips. She turned back to the console, her fingers already flying across the interface, initiating complex sequences. "Now, if you'll excuse me," she murmured, "we're only halfway done here." As Kaylin resumed her work, the tension in the engineering bay began to subtly shift. The initial skepticism among the engineers gave way to cautious awe. Her movements were precise, almost surgical. She was interacting with the system in a way they couldn't fathom, a deep, intuitive dialogue. And then, slowly, imperceptibly at first, the very nature of the ship itself began to change. The pervasive, unsettling whispers that had haunted the Starlight's hull for days, the ghostly chorus that spoke of its death knell, began to fade. Their volume diminished, their eerie resonance softened, replaced by a new faint pulse. It was almost imperceptible at first, a subtle rhythmic beat beneath the deck plates. Then a low, deep vibration began to build from below, from the very core of the propulsion system. It was a sound that made the exhausted engineers snap to attention, their eyes widening in disbelief, a deep, resonant hum, growing stronger, like a sleeping giant stirring. On the main diagnostic screens, which had shown only blackness or nonsensical glyphs, the lines of code that represented the core architecture began to shift, to flow, to rebuild themselves with an impossible fluidity. It was not a restart, it was a resurrection. A profound surge of power, a promise of life, resonating from the heart of the Starlight. The engineers watched, their jaws agape, as the silent behemoth began its impossible awakening, piece by digital piece. The deep vibration that had begun to build from below the Starlight intensified, becoming a powerful resonant hum that thrummed through the deck plates, vibrating up through the soles of every boot, through every bone. It was the sound of life returning, of a massive dormant beast stirring from a long slumber. On the primary diagnostic screens, the lines of code that represented the core architecture, previously stagnant or chaotic, now flowed with an impossible fluidity, rebuilding themselves, repairing, optimizing. Engineers who had spent 3 days staring at dead screens now crowded around their stations, watching in stunned disbelief as systems that had been completely unresponsive for days began to initialize, glowing green, booting up. Relief, raw and visceral, washed over them, quickly followed by a profound, almost spiritual awe. On the bridge, Commander Valerius watched the main status indicators flare to life. The ship's internal lights, which had been operating on auxiliary power, brightened, casting away the lingering shadows. "Bridge, this is engineering. Propulsion system is coming online." Chief Okafor's voice, hoarse with exhaustion but vibrant with a triumph previously unimaginable, crackled over the ship-wide communication system. Valerius felt a surge of energy, a potent mix of elation and bewilderment. He shared a look with Lieutenant Pham, who had tears welling in her eyes. The USS Starlight, America's newest supercarrier, was alive again. The giant was rousing. The hum beneath their feet grew steadier, more powerful, a symphony of latent might rekindled. Within minutes, the system indicators showed a startling 95% efficiency, with remaining minor issues flagged for repair once they returned to port. In the engineering bay, Kaylin moved with practiced calm, a stark contrast to the burgeoning excitement around her. She methodically closed the open panels, her movements precise, almost surgical. Her face showed no triumph, no satisfaction, only a quiet, almost serene determination. She carefully returned the specialized tools to her worn leather messenger bag, securing the clasps with a soft click. As she straightened, Admiral Thorne and Commander Valerius, having rushed down from the bridge, burst into the bay, their faces a mixture of disbelief and surging hope. "It's fixed," Kaylin said simply, her voice quiet, almost an understatement in the now buzzing, vibrant heart of the Starlight. The words hung in the air, a humble declaration of the impossible. The room erupted. Questions fired from all directions. How is this possible? What did you do? We tried every restart protocol in existence. Admiral Thorne, his stern expression now overlaid with a profound, almost reverent awe, raised a hand, silencing everyone. The sudden quiet was deafening, save for the powerful re-established hum of the engines. "What was the problem?" Thorne demanded, his gaze fixed on Kaylin, his voice low but cutting through the lingering tension. Kaylin looked at him, her piercing grey eyes holding a depth that seemed to encompass years of classified knowledge. "Your system was sabotaged. Not physically, mathematically." Her words were precise, unyielding. "Someone embedded a dormant algorithm in the control software that activated when you entered these waters. It was designed to choke the system, to simulate catastrophic failure while hiding its true status." "How did you know?" Valerius interjected, still struggling to reconcile the impossible. "Because I designed the original system," Kaylin stated, her voice even, matter of fact. "What you're using now is my work, just modified. I recognize the signature and the hidden messages." The room fell silent. Even the steady, powerful hum of the engines seemed to quiet in deference to this stunning revelation. The engineers who had toiled for days stared, their minds reeling. The architect, the creator of the very system that had brought them to their knees and now resurrected them. "Who are you?" Commander Valerius finally asked, the question a raw whisper, carrying the weight of disbelief, awe, and a dawning understanding. Before Kaylin could answer, Master Chief Grayson stepped forward. His silver hair glinted under the lights. His weathered face was set with a profound, unshakable conviction. He snapped to attention, his salute crisp, precise, executed with a force that seemed to surprise even himself. His gaze, fixed on Admiral Thorne, held a fierce, unwavering loyalty, but also an implicit challenge. "Sir," Grayson said, his voice ringing clearly through the now silent engineering bay, "she's the reason I'm alive to stand here today. She saved my life. She saved all of us on the USS Shadowclaw, when everyone else said it was impossible, when there was no hope." The engineering bay erupted into chaos once more. Questions fired from all directions, even more frenzied than before. The Master Chief's words, simple yet powerful, shattered the last vestiges of conventional understanding. An impossible feat, a forgotten mission, a living legend in their midst disguised as a civilian consultant. Admiral Thorne, his face a complex mosaic of shock, comprehension, and dawning strategic insight, quickly took control of the situation. Everyone not directly involved in propulsion restart procedures. "Clear the room," he bellowed, his voice cutting through the noise. "Now!" Admiral Thorne's voice, sharp and commanding, cut through the clamor that erupted after Master Chief Grayson's revelation. "Everyone not directly involved in propulsion restart procedures, clear the room, now!" The order, delivered with an authority that left no room for question, sent a ripple of frantic motion through the engineering bay. Specialists, technicians, and contractors, their faces still a mixture of awe and bewilderment, scrambled to obey, their questions left unspoken, their curiosity left unquenched. Within minutes, the vast space emptied, leaving only essential personnel: Thorne himself, Commander Valerius, Chief Engineer Okafor, Master Chief Grayson, and Kalen. The silence that returned was thick, charged with the weight of the impossible, the unknown. Thorne turned to Kalen, his stern gaze piercing. "I need a full explanation, now!" Kalen met his gaze, her expression composed, matter-of-fact. The Quantum Navigation Core, or Project Zenith as it was originally known, was designed with certain safeguards, she began, her voice steady, devoid of any personal grievance, merely stating facts. "When I left the program 15 years ago, those safeguards were systematically removed." She detailed the meticulous process, the lines of code that had been surgically excised, the ethical tripwires disarmed. The core purpose, once exploration, had been repurposed, militarized, and in that process fundamentally compromised. "What you have now," Kalen continued, gesturing vaguely towards the pulsing console where the Starlight systems were now stabilizing, "is a system that can be remotely triggered to fail under specific circumstances. Its ethical parameters, its inherent conscience have been ripped out." Valerius, still incredulous, his voice strained, asked, "Are you saying someone in our own government did this, designed this ship to fail?" Kalen corrected him, her voice precise, devoid of accusation, simply stating the cold, hard truth. "I'm saying the system was designed to include fail-safes that would prevent it from being used in ways I did not approve of. When I refused to remove those fail-safes, I was removed from the program instead. Someone else finished the work. They believed they were optimizing it, streamlining it, but they never fully understood the underlying architecture. They built on a foundation whose true purpose, whose inherent moral limits, they didn't comprehend. They created a beast without a muzzle, thinking it was stronger, more efficient. So, when the Starlight entered these specific coordinates, these particular waters, during high-alert operations, it triggered a dormant protocol. My protocol, one that was supposed to be impossible to bypass." Her words hung in the air, a chilling indictment not just of the system's vulnerability, but of the short-sighted ambition that had created it. Admiral Thorne's expression darkened. He grasped the full, horrifying implications. "If what you're saying is true," he said, his voice a low rumble, "every carrier in the fleet with this propulsion system could be vulnerable." "They are," Kalen stated simply, without hesitation. "The same foundational architecture, the same missing safeguards. It's a systemic vulnerability built into the very core of your most advanced vessels." The chilling reality settled over the small group. A profound silence fell, broken only by the revived hum of the Starlight's engines, now fully operational, ironically, under the very hand that had designed its hidden flaw. "But I've uploaded a patch," Kalen continued, turning back to the console, her fingers already navigating lines of code, working at a speed that left the others behind. "It should prevent this particular trigger from activating again, for the Starlight, for now. But it's a stopgap, a temporary fix for a symptom. The underlying architecture needs to be redesigned, rebuilt from the ground up, with the proper safeguards reintegrated. Only then will your fleet truly be secure." She looked at Thorn, her gaze steady. "I can do it. How much time?" Valerius asked, his mind already racing through the logistical nightmares. "A month, maybe 2, Kalen replied. "Depending on how much resistance I get from the contractors who modified my original design. They have their own interests, their own proprietary code layers to protect." She then delivered the final unsettling piece of her explanation. This incident wasn't an accident. Someone knew exactly when and where the Starlight would be vulnerable. They knew exactly how to trigger the failsafe. There are perhaps 3 people in the world who understood the core architecture well enough to exploit it this way. I'm one of them. The other 2 worked with me on the original Project Zenith. She paused, her voice hardening. Professor Thorn and Dr. Kalen, both brilliant, both ethically flexible. Admiral Thorn's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock. He pulled out his tablet, making rapid notes. The revelation of the culprits, high-profile figures in the world of advanced defense technology, added another layer of complexity to the unfolding crisis. This was no longer just about fixing a ship. It was about uncovering a profound betrayal, a silent war waged from within their own ranks by minds they once trusted. The fight for the Starlight, and indeed for the entire fleet, had just begun. The revelation of Professor Thorn and Dr. Kalen as likely culprits, figures once revered in their own right, sent a chilling undercurrent through the engineering bay. Admiral Thorn, his face a complex mosaic of shock and dawning strategic insight, pulled Valerius aside, their voices dropping to a hushed, urgent murmur. Chief Engineer Okafor, still processing the sheer scale of the ethical and technical betrayal Kalen had unveiled, remained at a console, monitoring the now humming propulsion system. "Can we trust her, Admiral?" Valerius whispered, the question raw, laden with the weight of the Starlight's near catastrophe. She admitted building in fail-safes that crippled one of our carriers. Even if her motives are principled, as she claims, it was still an act of defiance against direct orders. Thorn's gaze swept across the now functional bay, then out towards the distant, menacing silhouettes of the Donghai vessels. "Do we have a choice, Commander?" His voice was a low, dangerous rumble. "If what she says is true, the entire carrier group, perhaps the entire fleet, could be compromised by this fundamental flaw. If she's lying, then why fix the Starlight at all? She could have left us stranded." He paused, letting the bitter truth hang in the air. Valerius nodded slowly. "There's something else, sir. Master Chief Grayson's story about the Shadow Claw. I made a few discreet calls while she was working. That mission may not exist in official records, but there are people who remember it, people high up. What did they say?" Thorn pressed, his eyes narrowing. "They said," Valerius replied, his voice barely audible, "if she's who Grayson claims she is, we give her whatever she needs and stay out of her way." The words carried the unmistakable authority of a deep, unseen current in the Pentagon, a hidden strata of command that operated beyond the visible chain. Thorn took a deep breath, the implications vast, complex, and unsettling. "Very well," he conceded, the decision made, "but she doesn't leave my sight until this is done." They returned to Kalen's workstation. She was watching their conversation with patient detachment, as if she had expected their reluctant alliance. "You'll continue your work under supervision, Miss Kalen," Thorn informed her, his voice firm, authoritative. "Once the Starlight is fully operational, we'll discuss the fleet-wide implications and the necessary redesign." Kalen gave a curt nod. "I'll need access to secure communications to send the patch to Naval Intelligence," she stated, her voice quiet but precise, "and I'll need to verify when the other carriers receive and implement it." "Granted," Thorn replied, "but everything goes through proper channels." Of course, Kaylin said, a hint of a dry, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. She turned back to the console, her fingers already flying across the interface, initiating the protocols for the data transfer. She began to pack her few specialized tools into her worn leather messenger bag, her movements economical, efficient. A young helicopter pilot appeared at the door of the engineering bay, his face expectant. "Ma'am, your transport is ready." Valerius, who had lingered nearby, overheard the exchange. "You're leaving? Just like that?" He couldn't quite believe it. The woman who had just saved his ship, his command, and perhaps prevented an international incident, was preparing to vanish as quietly as she arrived. Kaylin shouldered her bag. "My work here is done, Commander." "But we don't even know your name," Valerius pressed, a sense of disbelief coloring his voice. "Your real name." A fleeting hint of a smile touched Kaylin's lips, deeper this time. "That's the point, Commander." She began to walk towards the exit, her steps light, almost soundless. "You just saved a $12 billion carrier and potentially prevented an international incident," Valerius called after her, frustration and a strange admiration mixing in his tone. "There should be recognition, commendations." "I've seen how the Navy handles recognition for classified operations," Kaylin replied, not looking back. "Trust me, this is better for everyone." On the flight deck, the wind whipped around them. Master Chief Grayson stood at attention, his silver hair ruffled by the downdraft from the waiting helicopter. One by one, as Kaylin walked towards her transport, the sailors who had witnessed her impossible work, the engineers from the bay, the bridge crew, the few curious onlookers, joined Grayson. They formed an impromptu honor guard, a silent line of respect. A salute rippled down the line, unofficial, unordered, but deeply felt, a testament to the quiet guardian who had defied all expectations. Kaylin paused. Her composed demeanor faltered for the briefest moment, a flicker of surprise, a hint of something vulnerable and human beneath the technical brilliance. For a precious second, her piercing eyes softened. She returned the salute, crisp and precise, then continued to the helicopter, stepping quickly into its waiting embrace without a backward glance. The rotors whined, then spun faster, lifting the aircraft into the morning sky. 2 weeks blurred into a single grinding cycle of classified reports and high-stakes briefings. Deep within the labyrinthine warren of the Pentagon, in a stark, windowless conference room bathed in the sterile glow of fluorescent lights, Admiral Thorne faced the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Secretary of Defense. The air was thick with unspoken tension, the weight of a near catastrophe, and the lingering questions about America's most advanced naval asset. Thorne, his uniform crisp, his posture ramrod straight, began his report. "The USS Starlight incident," Thorne stated, his voice calm, professional, yet carrying the profound gravity of recent events, "was not a system malfunction. It was a sophisticated act of sabotage, designed to activate precisely when the carrier entered those specific coordinates in the South China Sea. The dormant code, expertly hidden within the core system architecture, was triggered, initiating a recursive shutdown sequence intended to simulate total catastrophic failure. He outlined the technical details with clinical precision, describing the digital chokehold, the illusion of mechanical collapse, and the insidious way the system had actively hidden its true operational status. He spoke of the frenzied binary storms on the screens, the inexplicable whispers emanating from the hull, details that still sent a shiver down his spine. He then explained the necessity of Kaylin's intervention, her immediate understanding of the problem, and the subsequent upload of her patch to mitigate that specific vulnerability fleet-wide. The Chief of Naval Operations, a man whose eyes held the weary wisdom of decades overseeing global fleets, leaned forward. And we are certain this was intentional, Admiral, not some unforeseen bug in a cutting-edge system? His voice was gravelly, searching for absolute certainty. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, sir, Thorne confirmed, his gaze unwavering. The code's concealment was masterful. It bore the signature of an architect, not just a programmer. Without Ms. Kalen's direct intervention, the Starlight would have remained stranded for weeks, possibly months. He painted a stark picture of the diplomatic implications. The Chinese would have interpreted our immobility as weakness, a profound vulnerability. The incident was precisely timed and located to undermine our position in the ongoing South China Sea negotiations. It was a direct, targeted attack designed to inflict strategic humiliation and potentially escalate tensions between global powers. The political fallout would have been severe, compromising our stance, weakening alliances, and projecting an image of technological obsolescence. He spoke of the Donghai vessels circling, the boldness of their flyovers, the constant pressure they exerted, all amplified by the Starlight's unprecedented silence. The Secretary of Defense, a man of sharp intellect and unflappable demeanor, steepled his fingers. And the woman, Admiral? His voice was quiet but held immense weight. What became of her after she left the carrier? Where is Miss Kalen now? Thorne's expression gave nothing away. She disappeared, sir. After she left the Starlight, she vanished from our tracking systems. As if she simply ceased to exist. The CNO exchanged a glance with another Joint Chief. Perhaps that's for the best, Admiral, the CNO said, his voice lowering. Some assets are more effective when they remain unofficial, untraceable, when they operate entirely in the shadows. The implication was clear. Kalen was a tool, a unique resource, but one best kept off the books, free from the constraints and visibility of formal military structure. With respect, sir, Thorne countered, his voice firm, challenging the unspoken sentiment. She raised serious concerns about the fundamental security of our propulsion systems. She believes there are additional, deeper vulnerabilities that could still be exploited. Not just the specific trigger that disabled the Starlight, but systemic flaws. She claims a complete architectural redesign is necessary. He reiterated Kalen's warning about the true purpose of Project Zenith, about the ethical fail-safes that had been removed, and the horrifying vision she had witnessed of the technology's ultimate misuse. Did she provide specific details? The Secretary asked pointedly. Only that a complete redesign is necessary, sir, Thorne replied, and she offered to assist under appropriate security measures. She stated it would take a month, maybe two, depending on cooperation from the contractors who modified her original design. The Secretary's gaze fixed on Thorne, cold and direct. And you trust her, Admiral? After she admitted to building in the very fail-safes that crippled one of our carriers? After she defied direct orders that led to this vulnerability? The question hung in the air, challenging Thorne's judgment, his loyalty. Thorne considered his words carefully, choosing them with the precision of a surgeon. I believe her motives are complex, sir, but not malicious. Her actions on the USS Shadowclaw decades ago, where she risked her life to save 118 sailors, demonstrate a profound commitment to human life, regardless of mission parameters. The fact remains, sir, that when called upon to fix the problem, she did so without hesitation, even though, as you point out, she was the one who designed the safeguards against weaponizing technology originally intended for exploration. Whether we agree with her methods, her technical expertise is undeniable. She is by far the only mind capable of fully comprehending and therefore correcting this profound vulnerability. He knew he was taking a risk, vouching so strongly for a figure so unconventional, so resistant to direct control, but the crisis was too grave to allow conventional thinking to prevail. The Secretary of Defense made a note on his tablet, his expression unreadable. I'll take this under advisement. In the meantime, Admiral, I want a full security audit of all quantum navigation systems across the fleet. Every single one. If there are more vulnerabilities, I want them found before they're exploited, not after. The order was definitive, echoing through the room. The meeting concluded, briefcases snapped shut, chairs scraped back. As the other Joint Chiefs began to filter out, the CNO held Admiral Thorne back, his hand on Thorne's arm. His voice dropped to a near whisper, laden with a secret history. "There's something you're not including in your report, Thorne." Thorne nodded, his gaze meeting the CNO's. "The Shadow Claw incident, sir." Master Chief Grayson recognized her immediately. He recounted Grayson's testimony, the chilling details of the reactor failure, Kalen's impossible feat.
"That mission remains highly classified for good reason, sir."
The technology being tested was decades ahead of its time. And yet, she walked into an irradiated reactor chamber and saved the crew when our own engineers said it was impossible. She designed that reactor. The CNO sighed, a deep, weary sound. Kalen is a complicated asset, Admiral, brilliant beyond measure, but with a moral compass that doesn't always align with national security objectives. She sees a larger game, a different kind of battlefield. He paused, his eyes piercing Thorne's. "May I speak freely, sir?" "Go ahead," Thorne urged. "Perhaps," the CNO said, his voice a low, profound rumble. "That's exactly what we need sometimes. Someone whose primary allegiance is to the truth, to ethical principles, rather than to policy. Someone who can see the shadows even when we're blinded by our own light." He then leaned closer, his voice dropping to an almost inaudible tone. "And that image, Admiral, the one you have on your private tablet, the one you didn't show the Secretary?" Thorne remained silent. The CNO continued, "The one from the Malaysian facility, showing Professor Thorne and Dr. Kalen, and the third figure, the one with the obscured face, the one who truly pulls the strings. They are not merely collaborators, they are the visible faces of something far larger. An international shadow organization, Admiral, operating beyond national borders, manipulating technology for their own unseen agenda. They are the true masterminds. Kalen's insights are not just technical, Thorne, they are strategic intelligence of the highest order. She's been watching them, waiting for them to show their hand. The Starlight was merely a pawn in a much grander game. The air in the classified corridor suddenly felt colder, thinner, filled with the vast, chilling implications of a global invisible war. The realization confirmed Kalen's uncanny insight, her vision, and painted a terrifying picture of the enemy they truly faced. 2 weeks after the impossible awakening of the USS Starlight, the colossal carrier sliced through the South China Sea, its systems humming with perfect precision. The propulsion unit, once a dead weight, now ran at an astonishing 98% efficiency, a performance surpassing even its initial sea trials. Chief Engineer Okafor, a man still grappling with the revelations of that desperate week, conducted a thorough analysis of Kalen's modifications. "It's elegant, Commander," he explained to Valerius during his report, his voice tinged with a mix of awe and bewilderment. "She didn't just fix the problem, she improved the entire architecture. We're seeing a 12% increase in efficiency and better response times across all systems. It's like she breathed new life into the core, aligning it with its original, purer design. Naval Intelligence has already authorized a fleet-wide update based on her modifications. The crisis had yielded an unexpected, profound upgrade. Yet the shadow of the sabotage lingered. Any progress on identifying the source of the attack?" Valerius pressed, his expression hardening. Okafor's demeanor darkened. "That's been more challenging, sir." The code was exquisitely sophisticated, laced with multiple layers of encryption. "But we did find something interesting." He pulled up a file on his tablet, a complex mathematical equation deeply embedded within the system. This signature doesn't match any known programming style in our database, but according to Miss Kalen's notes, it bears striking similarities to work being done by a Donghai quantum computing lab. Valerius studied the equation, the advanced mathematics far beyond his comprehension. So we're looking at Donghai sabotage? Not necessarily, Okafor cautioned, his voice lowered. Miss Kalen flagged it as suspiciously convenient in her notes, meaning someone wanted us to think it was the Donghai, which makes me suspect it wasn't. She believed it was a deliberate misdirection. Valerius rubbed his temples. Keep digging, Chief. I want answers, all of them. 6 months later, Commander Valerius received a summons to Washington. The meeting took place not at the Pentagon, but in an unmarked, highly secure office building in Arlington, far from the usual military brass. When he arrived, he was surprised to find Admiral Thorne already there, along with several high-ranking intelligence officials he didn't recognize. Commander Valerius, Thorne greeted him, a glint in his eye. Thank you for coming on short notice. Of course, sir, though I'm not sure what this is about, Valerius replied, his gaze sweeping the room, taking in the satellite imagery and complex technical diagrams plastering the walls. Then, his eyes snagged on a familiar figure standing by the window. Silver-streaked auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun. Kalen. Miss Kalen, he said, genuine surprise in his voice. I didn't expect to see you again. She turned, that same hint of a smile touching her lips. I told Master Chief Grayson I'd be watching, Commander. We found the source of the attack, Admiral Thorne explained, his voice losing its initial cordiality, becoming sharp, focused. Or rather, Miss Kalen did. She's been working as a consultant for naval intelligence since leaving the Starlight. Valerius looked between them, confused. I thought she disappeared. Officially, yes, Kalen acknowledged, but some work requires even deeper shadows. The intelligence officer gestured to a satellite image. We've identified a research facility in Malaysia. It served as the origin point for the code that disabled your ship. It's operated by a private military contractor with ties to multiple nations, including our own, Kalen added pointedly, her voice firm. Valerius absorbed this. So, not the Donghai? The Donghai were as much a target as we were, Thorne explained. The goal was to create an incident between our forces that would escalate tensions. Fortunately, we avoided that outcome. Thanks to Miss Kalen, this time Kailan cautioned, but the vulnerability remains across multiple systems across your entire fleet, which is why I've agreed to come back temporarily to help address the fundamental architecture issues, the core redesign. As night fell over the city, the meeting continued. Kalen explained in technical detail the scope of the problem and her proposed solutions. Throughout it all, Valerius was struck by the contrast between her unassuming appearance and the clear deference shown to her by some of the most powerful people in military intelligence. Later, as they walked to the parking garage, Valerius finally asked the question that had bothered him for months. Why do you do this? You clearly don't trust the military establishment. You built fail-safes specifically to limit how your technology could be used, and yet here you are, helping again. Kalen stopped, considering him carefully before answering. My issue has never been with the sailors or soldiers, Commander. It's with how technology gets weaponized, often beyond its original purpose, without ethical consideration. It's with the hunger for power that blinds men to the consequences. But you're still helping us, Valerius pressed. I'm helping to protect people from my own creations being misused, Kalen corrected. There's a difference. As she turned to leave, Valerius called after her. Will we see you again after this project is complete? She looked back over her shoulder, a faint, weary smile. Let's hope not, Commander. If you see me again, it means something has gone catastrophically wrong. Or perhaps the true reckoning has begun. Valerius returned to the Starlight, still patrolling confidently through the South China Sea. He found Master Chief Grayson standing at the rail, watching the sunset paint the horizon in brilliant oranges and purples. "I pulled every string I could, Chief," Valerius said. "Favors. Tried to find out who she really was. Her records are blank." Grayson nodded, unsurprised. "Some people don't need recognition, sir. They just do what needs to be done. They're the quiet guardians most will never know about." Valerius leaned against the rail, watching the water churn below. "She said something about, if I see her again, it means something has gone catastrophically wrong. What did she mean, Chief? Does she really think there's more coming?" Grayson's gaze drifted to the distant horizon, a profound weariness in his eyes. He lowered his voice, delivering Kalen's chilling message, a detail he had kept secret until now. She said, "The system is a living network, and they've sown other seeds." She said, "If the light of Starlight cannot pierce all shadows, there will be a reckoning." His words hung in the twilight, a prophecy of a future conflict far beyond the scope of a single carrier, a battle fought not just on the seas, but in the unseen currents of global technology. It was a warning, a call to arms, an acknowledgement that Kalen, the architect, the guardian, had seen the coming storm and was preparing for a war that had truly only just begun, in the shadows that no one knew existed. This immense vessel, the USS Starlight, now a testament to one woman's brilliance, continued its silent patrol. Its systems hummed with perfect precision, a silent promise. But beneath the surface, a new kind of war had just begun, a dance of algorithms and shadows fought by unseen guardians like Kalen, whose names remain classified, whose battles were waged not with missiles, but with code. Thank you for listening to this untold tale from the depths of history and beyond. We hope you were captivated by the secrets of the Starlight and the quiet courage of those who guard the unseen lines. If you enjoyed this story, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing it with a friend, and subscribing to Veteran Biker for more gripping narratives. What was your favorite moment from this story, or what questions did it leave you with? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to check out our other videos appearing on your screen now for more captivating tales.